Hey there, welcome to Strong and Healthy, a podcast for local church leaders, families, and maybe even my grandchildren. My name is Steve Barr, and here's where you're going to find practical nuggets on a wide variety of topics to encourage, challenge, and hopefully inspire you to take your next steps in God. Hey, welcome back, everybody. We're on another episode of Strong and Healthy. And we are on part 2 of spiritual authority. The last episode, we talked about the fact that all authority comes from God. Only God has inherent authority. Also, we talked about anything not submitted to God's authority is rebellion. So today, we're going to continue with point number 3 here on spiritual authority. All other authority is delegated authority. All other authority is delegated. So every authority in your life, whether it's government officials, whether it's kings or presidents or policemen or parents or teachers or bosses or older siblings, it doesn't matter who it is. All authority is delegated authority. None of those have inherent authority like God does. All the authority is delegated by God to us. For example, parents, God gives them the authority to raise the kids, raise the children as best as they can, knowing that the children do not belong to the parents, but they belong to God. And we have to answer to God for how we raise those kids. And teachers, they have authority. That's delegated authority from God because God gives the parents authority. And the parents delegate that authority to the teachers. Or the parents could delegate authority to, say, an older sibling who's watching the other children while the parents are out. If you want to find out if your kids understand spiritual authority, try putting the second oldest in charge. That would be a pretty fun experiment to see if that works out. Or maybe your second person is the one that's in charge anyway. So all other authority is delegated authority. Only God has inherent authority. So when we submit to God, we submit to God 100% of the time. Submission is an attitude. Submission is an attitude. Romans 13:1, everyone must submit to the governing authorities. So we also obey God 100% of the time. This is difficult. Sometimes God calls us to do something or asks us to do something that's quite difficult. Even when he called Abraham to offer his son as a sacrifice, Abraham submitted to God. That was his attitude, and his action of obedience was 100%. He was willing to do that. So when it comes to delegated authorities, we submit to them 100% of the time. Our attitude is always an attitude of submission, understanding that every authority over us, whether it's a teacher or a parent or a boss or a policeman, whatever it is, God put those people in position of authority over us, and we submit to their authority. Now, the authority is not in every area of our life. For example, if a policeman pulls you over for speeding, he has an authority in that area for traffic laws and such. He doesn't have authority to come into your house and tell you how to raise your kids or what color to paint your walls. It's a limited authority for that sphere of influence. When it comes to obeying delegated authorities, it's not 100%. It's 100% submission to God. It's 100% obedience to God. It's a 100% submission to delegated authorities, and we always have the attitude of submission. But when it comes to obedience, it depends on whether or not it breaks God's laws. Peter said, we must obey God rather than man. So they put a priority on obedience to God rather than obedience to man when they're in conflict. But Peter said it in a submitted way. He didn't cuss them out. He didn't get mad and angry and yell at them and berate them and those kind of things. But he had a submitted attitude, but he said, no, I am not going to obey you. I'm going to obey God. So submission is an attitude and obedience is an action. So when it comes to delegated authorities, we can't use that as an excuse, because if we're honest, rarely does a delegated authority ever ask you to disobey God. It would be very rare indeed. And there are instances where it happens. Say you were a soldier in the Nazi regime in World War II and you were asked to kill Jews. That would be a horrible, a grievous sin against Almighty God. And those soldiers did not have to obey that because they obey God, but not necessarily obey man when it contradicts God's laws. So here's how you could make a godly appeal to a delegated authority who asks you to disobey God. And it does happen from time to time, but not often. So here's how you make a godly appeal. First of all, you check your own heart. Ask yourself, is this just something I don't want to do? So I'm saying God doesn't want me to do that? Or you just don't want to do it? Or maybe it's something that you don't agree with. You know, maybe decorate an office with blue chairs instead of green chairs or something. I don't agree with that, so I don't have to obey. No, if your boss says do something, you want to do that. So if say at work, a boss asks you to say that he's not there when you answer the phone, and you go to the boss and you say, I'm sorry, I can't lie. I don't want to lie. So you go in an attitude of submission. You've checked your own heart. Now you go in a submissive attitude. Romans 13:1, everyone must submit to the governing authorities. There's no authority except that which God has established. You go with a respectful attitude. You communicate the issue, the problem you have, and then you can make a creative alternative. So say he says, I want you to say, I'm not here when the phone rings. And you say, could I possibly say you're not available? I really have a problem with not telling the truth. And I'll tell you what, if you go in an attitude of submission and you want to honor him and you want to do the right thing, whoever the boss is, usually that will work. 99% of the time that works. But say if the boss says, no, you say exactly what I tell you to say, and they're asking you to lie, then you have to make a choice. Do I obey God or do I obey man? And if you choose not to obey your boss, then you have to be willing to suffer the consequences. You might lose your job, you might get fired, and you would be suffering for doing the right thing. Or if you're a soldier back in the Nazi regime, you'd be disobeying an evil order, and you might get shot. It might cost you your life. So those things are very rare, but there is a way out. Peter said we must obey God rather than men. Number 4, we are always either in authority or we are under authority. Remember this, everywhere you are, anytime it is, every situation you're in, you on earth here, I'm not talking about always under God's authority, I'm talking about people here, you're always in authority or under authority. Every situation. If you are at work, the boss is in charge. If you're at school, the teacher's in charge. If you're driving on the road, the policeman's in charge of whether or not you obey the laws. Children, you're called to obey your parents. We're always either in authority or under authority. And then the 5th point here is to remember that when we are in authority, we are representing God's authority to them. I'll tell you what, God does not like to be misrepresented. If you're in authority, if you're an older sibling watching your younger siblings, if you're a parent, if you're a teacher or a boss or a community group leader or an elder or in any situation when you're in authority and you understand that God put you there because all authority God has established, you won't misrepresent God. You'll always represent God well. He doesn't like to be misrepresented. Just look how Jesus spoke to the religious leaders. He spoke in love, but he spoke truth to them. And Jesus said, if you offend even one of these little ones, that means you're in a position of authority and you are offending, you're misrepresenting God's leadership and love and care and servant-hearted leadership. You're misrepresenting that. So, if you are under authority, you're not in authority, but if you're under authority, under a parent, a teacher, a boss, whatever you do or say, do it as unto the Lord. Always, always make it easy for people to lead you. I want to encourage you. Spiritual authority is a big deal. And when we see somebody misrepresenting God's authority, when we see somebody maligning the boss or talking bad about the boss, it should actually grieve us because we are undermining God's authority. All right? Hope this is a little bit of a primer for us. Dig deep into it. If you're a teacher or a pastor that's presenting this, make sure you understand this clearly and teach your people to understand that we always, always, always obey God. We always submit to His authority. God bless you guys. Love you. Hey guys, thanks for joining in with me today. I'm really encouraged to see folks wanting to become more fruitful and effective in their ministries. Strong and Healthy is a work in progress with regular updates, so stay tuned for more. And please subscribe to this channel so you can get the latest content. And also, if you'd like, you can email me with questions and encouragements at contactstevebarr@gmail.com. God bless. See you next time.